Henry always thought of his marriage to Laura as something like a solid old rock, not always smooth, with cracks and scratches, but stable. They had been together for almost 8 years. They met in Chicago when Laura was working as a waitress in a small cafe where he often stopped for lunch. Her smile could drive anyone crazy back then. Her voice was a little husky, like the singers on old jazz records, and there was something magnetic about it. Henry fell in love almost immediately. And she seemed to feel the same way. Everything was real: walks through the city at night, cheap wine in the kitchen after work, jokes about growing old together. They got married in their 3rd year of dating. At first, they lived modestly. Then Henry got a promotion. He became a manager at a logistics company, and Laura decided to go work in an office. "I want to fulfill myself," she said. Henry had no objections. On the contrary, he was proud of her ambitions. He always believed that she was capable of more than just serving coffee and croissants. But lately, everything had become somehow different. It was as if someone had quietly turned down the volume on their relationship, and now everything sounded false. At first, Laura became colder. She no longer laughed at his old jokes, which used to make her cry with laughter. She asked less and less about how his day had gone. Her gaze seemed glassy, absent. She was often on her phone, even when they were having dinner. And what worried Henry the most was that she no longer touched him just because. There were no spontaneous hugs, light kisses, those little, almost imperceptible gestures that usually say more than words. He didn't want to make a big deal out of it. At first, he blamed it on stress at work. Then fatigue. Then mood swings. But deep down, something told him that wasn't the case. One evening, he came home earlier than usual. The sky was just beginning to darken, and the apartment was dimly lit. He walked in and saw Laura sitting on the couch. Her face was red, and her eyes were shiny with tears, either from laughter or something else. She pressed the phone to her chest when she heard the door open. She was surprised. Her hands jerked. For a moment, her face looked guilty. It was only a moment, but Henry noticed. "Hi. What are you looking at?" he asked, trying to sound calm. "Nothing. A meme from work. My boss sent it," she replied quickly, too quickly. Then she added, "It's really stupid, but funny. You're early today." He sat down next to her, trying to read something in her face, but she had already put on her usual mask, a smile, a light laugh, conversation about some everyday trifles. And yet, an anxious knot was already forming in his chest. That evening, she went to bed early, citing a headache. Henry stayed in the living room. He didn't turn on the TV or scroll through the news on his phone. He just sat and stared at one spot. Something had changed in the air. It was impossible to explain it logically, but he felt that a third person had appeared between them. His wife was hiding something. And he was going to find out what it was. A week later, Henry was no longer just guessing. He began to notice specific things. First, there was the unfamiliar perfume on her jacket. Then there were the phone calls she took in the bathroom or on the balcony. She spoke more quietly than usual and always ended the conversation with the words, "I'll text you." He saw her hide her phone when he entered the room. Not immediately. These movements were subtle, as if accidental. But they repeated themselves, like a chain forming a single suspicious sequence. One evening, when Laura went to take a shower, her phone was left on the sofa. Henry sat in the kitchen, listening to the sound of water running through the pipes. His gaze was fixed on the screen. The phone flashed, a notification from the messenger. The contact's name was Boss. He hesitated. Part of him still clung to the last shreds of trust. But something in him had finally broken. His hand reached out, almost automatically. He opened the phone. The screen was unlocked. She hadn't thought about a password. Or she was too confident. What he saw knocked the wind out of him. "Can't wait for tomorrow. I was thinking about you so much this morning that I could hardly concentrate on my report's smirky face. Let's pretend we're discussing the budget, okay, winky face. I hope he still doesn't suspect anything?" "I don't want any problems," Photos. One taken in the conference room. Another in the elevator. She was smiling, biting her lower lip. One of the photos was quite unambiguous. Her knees in tight black tights spread apart. A selfie taken from above. Henry looked at it all as if it were a horror movie. But this was his life. His wife. His home. He didn't hear the water stop running. He didn't notice when she came up behind him. Henry? Her voice sounded familiar, even warm. Why are you sitting here in the dark? He quickly put the phone back. The screen went blank. He looked at her. A towel wrapped around her body, her hair dripping water onto her shoulders. She looked carefree. Innocent. Just tired, he replied. His voice was calm. Too calm. Are you sure you're okay? She narrowed her eyes, looking intently into his. But then she turned away and went to the bedroom. He sat there thinking about what had happened. Betrayal, yes. But what broke him even more was her face, the mask behind which she hid her lies. Her voice, which could gently ask, "Would you like some tea?" After she had been texting her lover in the bathroom. It wasn't just a betrayal of the body, it was a betrayal of everything. He didn't sleep that night. Her breathing next to him seemed foreign. His hand lay on the blanket next to her, but he felt like he was sleeping in bed with a ghost. Starting tomorrow, everything would be different. He had to act. He couldn't live with the lie anymore. He didn't know exactly how he would do it. But she would no longer be able to avoid the conversation. Henry woke up early. Too early for a Saturday. Laura was still asleep, curled up as if nothing had happened. Her hair was scattered across the pillow, her mouth slightly open. She looked innocent, and that annoyed him the most. Because now he knew everything she had been pretending in recent weeks, concern, laughter, belated kisses, was fake. He went into the kitchen, poured himself some coffee, then took her phone out of the drawer. She always left it charging on the table. This time there was a password. She had changed it quickly. Henry clenched his teeth. Perfect, she already knows something is wrong. And now she's hiding. Like a coward. Half an hour later, Laura woke up. She came into the kitchen wearing his t-shirt, pulled down to her knees, and with a feigned sleepy smile. "Good morning," she said. "How did you sleep?" "Great. How about you?" Henry didn't even look up from his coffee cup. "Fine. Can I take the shower first?" "Laura. Sit down." She froze. For a moment. Just a moment, but he noticed it anyway. Then her face became playful, as if to say, "Why so serious first thing in the morning? Is something wrong?" "Sit down," he repeated quietly, but with a tone that made her not want to argue. She sat down. She crossed her arms. Wary. Tense. Her eyes darted around the room, not stopping on him. "Who are you sleeping with?" he asked bluntly. "No introductions. No drama." "What?" she exploded. "Are you out of your mind? What the hell is this?" "I saw everything, Laura. The phone. The messages. The photos. Boss." She turned pale. As if someone had suddenly drained her of blood. Her lips stretched into something resembling a smile, but her eyes betrayed her panic. It's not what you think," she whispered. "Really? Then enlighten me. You didn't spread your legs for your boss in the office? It was just an artistic photo. You have no right to go through my phone. That's an invasion of privacy." "Privacy?" Henry stood up. His voice broke. "What the hell are you talking about privacy when you're cheating on me in the same office where I supported you in your work? Where you swore you had finally found yourself?" She jumped up from her seat and rushed towards him. "It was a mistake. I don't know how it happened. It was just once," she said quickly, her eyes shining with tears. "I was drunk," he was persistent. "I didn't want to. Once? What about the messages during the week? The photos? The jokes about budgets? Was all that just once?" She fell silent. Tears were streaming down her face, but Henry no longer believed them. He had seen them before, after arguments, when she had done something wrong, when she wanted to avoid responsibility. She always cried. It was her shield. "You disgust me right now," he said quietly. "Not because of the sex. Because of the lies. Because even now you're trying to get out of it. Henry, I didn't mean to. I'm going to ruin everything. But we can try. You love me, don't you?" She rushed to him and grabbed his hand. "I'll fix everything. I'll quit my job. I'll break up with him. We'll go somewhere, relax like before." He pulled his hand away. "I don't recognize you." She fell to the floor, crying loudly, hugging her knees like a child. His heart was tight, but not with pity, with disgust. She was a good actress. A hysterical woman who knew how to cry on command. Henry left the kitchen. An idea was already forming in his head. He didn't just want to leave, he wanted her lover to pay. But for now, he had to appear weak. Silent. So they would think they had won. But in reality, the game was just beginning. The following days were like a prolonged hangover. Not the kind that passes after an evening of whiskey, but a deeper, more internal one. Henry woke up to a silence that no longer felt cozy. It was deafening, viscous, like concrete pressing down on his chest. Laura was acting strangely. She tried to be caring. She made coffee, cleaned, even baked cupcakes, which she never liked. Then she withdrew into herself, walking around the apartment like a ghost. She cried in the evenings. But worst of all, she lied. Small, dull, clumsy lies. "It was a period," she said. "I got confused." He took advantage of the moment. "It's all over now." But Henry wasn't listening anymore. He was watching. He watched her lips twitch when she made something up. How she swallowed air before her next excuse. He knew it was still going on. Maybe not physically, but in her head, in her thoughts, in the memory of their messages. She continued to live in a world where someone else stood between them. In his head, everything was different too. At first, there was anger. Primitive, animalistic. He wanted to smash something against the wall. Throw her things off the balcony. Call that creature her boss, and tell him everything he thought. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the feeling that a betrayed husband was not the image he wanted to see himself in. Or maybe it was the desire to do something different. Deeper. More painful. He remembered moments from the past. How she was sick, and he sat by her all night, holding her hand. How she lost her father, and he helped her cope. How she laughed at the hotel in Savannah when he fell off his surfboard. All these images now had a bitter taste. He looked at them as if they were a movie he loved, but then found out that the actors were scumbags. There were many tears. But not in public. At night, when she was already asleep and he went to the living room. His soul was like a ruin after an explosion. There were still some walls standing here and there, but everything else was destroyed. And like every man who kept everything inside, he couldn't even speak like a human being. Only silence. On the fourth day after the conversation, he took action. He wrote down the number of an IT guy he knew from an old notebook. He had once helped him set up security on his corporate account. Now he needed another kind of help. "I need to know what she wrote and when," Henry explained briefly. "Is it possible to retrieve deleted correspondence?" Henry explained briefly. The man simply said, "Give me a couple of days. And access to her cloud, if you have it." After the conversation, Henry did not feel any relief. But it was a starting point. A reference point. When you're drowning, it's important to have at least some kind of goal. Even if that goal is revenge. That same night, Laura tried to talk again. "I know everything is ruined," she began. "But I don't know how to live without you. I did something stupid. The biggest mistake of my life. But we can start over. Go to therapy. Go somewhere. Forget." "I don't want to forget," he replied in an even tone. "I want to remember." So I never make the same mistake again. You talk as if it's your fault. My fault is that I trusted you more than you deserved. She said nothing more. She went to the bedroom. This time without tears. Henry remained sitting in the chair, clutching the old notebook in his hands. On the first page, he wrote in large letters, "The plan." It was only the beginning. Henry wasn't the type of man to make threats or throw dishes during arguments. His style was quiet, cold analysis. That's why, instead of yelling at Laura or calling her lover, he devised a plan. With timelines, dates, evidence. Like an analyst compiling a dossier on an enemy. The first step was confirmation. The IT specialist did not disappoint. He pulled dozens of messages, including voice messages, from the cloud backup. There were not only intimate phrases, but also frank discussions of the details of their relationship. Some of them even took place during working hours, in the company's official correspondence. The evidence was so clear that Henry had no doubt left. The second step was to find out everything about her boss. He worked in an office on the 5th floor of a skyscraper in the center. Married. 2 children. He went to the same gym as Henry's brother, a coincidence that came in handy. Through his connections, Henry gained access to the company's internal chats, found out what projects he was overseeing. When the contract for office coffee machines was signed, that's when some of their meetings took place, and who his immediate supervisor was. The third step was action. But not impulsive action. Henry decided to strike where it hurt most: reputation. He prepared an anonymous report. It was detailed, with attached screenshots, dates, and timestamps. He laid everything out dryly, with legal precision. Not a drop of emotion, just facts. He sent the document to the HR department, with a copy to senior management and the manager's wife. He found the latter through Facebook. 2 days later, all hell broke loose in Laura's office. She came home with red eyes. Someone filed a complaint against him. Anonymously. I don't know who. He was given administrative leave. Her voice trembled. Henry, was it you? He was silent. He just looked at her the way one looks at the fall of empires. Was it you? She burst out, loudly, hysterically. You destroyed my career. His family. Everything. Didn't you think you destroyed mine? He said calmly. I apologized. I wanted to fix everything. You didn't want to fix it. You wanted me to forget. She covered her face with her hands. Then she fell onto the sofa and sat there silently for a long time. He stood there, unmoved, almost empty inside. He felt no satisfaction. There was no euphoria or triumphant victory. But there was meaning in it. He showed them that lies have a price. That trust is not rose petals, but concrete, and when you drive over it with a tank, it doesn't stick together. That same evening, he packed his things. He threw only the essentials into his bag. She tried to say something, but he stopped her. Now we're even. And he left, leaving behind only the door that slowly closed behind him. The next day, he bought a new SIM card, blocked her on social media, and sent a letter to dissolve the marriage. There were no more plans. There was no more Laura. Now there was only him. And a new blank page. Half a year passed. Henry lived in a small apartment in the suburbs, with windows overlooking a park where dogs ran in the mornings and children shouted in the evenings. Life, which once seemed dull, had now become honest, real, without illusions. He wasn't looking for a new relationship. He didn't go on dates, even though he had invitations. First with colleagues. Then with a neighbor who left pies on his door handle. But he wasn't ready yet. And perhaps for the first time in his life, he didn't feel guilty about it. His therapist, an elderly man with a voice like the rustling of an old tree, once said, "You've come out of a fire. Don't rush into the next one." Henry just nodded then, but those words stuck in his head. He allowed himself to be silent. He allowed himself to grieve. And most difficult of all, to forgive. Not her. Himself. For not wanting to see the obvious for so long. For not protecting himself. Laura wrote sometimes. Rarely. Briefly. I hope you're okay. Or, I think about us a lot. He didn't respond. Once she called, from an unknown number. He listened as she remained silent on the other end, then hung up. But even that silence meant nothing anymore. Her former boss resigned. The official version was due to health reasons. The unofficial version was clear to everyone. His wife filed for divorce and took the children. And Laura was transferred to another department. No promotion. No prospects. No usual flirting and attention. Henry did not triumph. But from time to time, he caught himself thinking that he had stood his ground. That he had survived. He no longer dreamed about her lying. It didn't hurt when he walked past the cafe where they first met. The memory became just a memory, not a wound. He learned to live differently. To allow himself to feel sadness, but not to let it destroy him. He knew that pain was not an enemy, but a signal. Something had broken. But now he could build something new. One evening, he sat in the same cafe where he had first seen Laura. At a different table. A different time. A different him. The waitress asked. Anything special today? Henry smiled. Yes. Just coffee. And no lies. She nodded and walked away. And he looked out the window again. And he realized, life wasn't over. It just became more real. And this time, he wasn't going to betray himself.
Subscribe and like, and send the video to your friends.